Goedemiddag allemaal. Ik hoorde een eerdere keynote spreken, een Nederlands spreken. Ik woon al heel lang in Nederland. Maar wat ik wil met jullie vanmiddag delen is heel persoonlijk. En ik heb het een aantal keer geprobeerd in Nederlands, maar het lukt mij niet. So, mag ik doorgaan in Engels? Okay. And if you don't understand me, there are plenty of pictures and films to sort of show you the journey. I think the reason we were talking about it earlier, why I'm here today, and I have a number of colleagues around me who organize my sort of digital life, but there's another life I lead, and I think the theme of this conference was sort of beyond horizons. And for the majority of my life, I've sort of been using that theme to answer some questions. And those questions are very, very basic. It's extremely basic, so don't be in any way expecting something sort of high and mighty and intellectual. It's very much who am I and who are you, who we are as people, and this sort of desperate urge to keep communicating. So I think after the last few days, with all your sort of technological advances and thoughts and ideas, there's a very basic element which is extremely important, is who are we to communicate to one another and why. So I'm going to take you on a journey and explain my sort of somewhat strange, weird process and how I'm trying to answer these questions. I'm going to begin in, can everybody hear me well? Is the volume okay? I'm going to begin in Sudan. Have any of you ever been to Sudan? Okay. Bit of a strange place. I was invited there last year by an organization. They said, Jimmy, you know, you're doing this project and you're making films and taking pictures of sort of dying indigenous cultures or disappearing indigenous cultures. You have to come to Sudan, to the Mundari. I was going, yeah, but there's a war going on in Sudan. He said, oh, yeah, but it's been going on for years and years and years. And it's a gewoonte. Everybody runs around with guns and, you know, don't worry about it. We'll look after you. And I said, yeah, but, you know, I've got responsibilities and got this project. And he says, but you have to come to these people. They're some of the last and most beautiful people on the planet. And because we've been fighting here for the last 40 years, nobody's ever been to this group of Mundari. They live in a bubble by the Nile, and you'll be the very first one. And you'll be fine. I said, well, okay, I'll go. And I travel with a partner, sort of camera lady, and she documents everything. And I came up to her and said, hey, Steph, it's going to be okay. You know, they all run around with guns, but trust me, I've been doing this for 50 years. It'll all be okay. So we sort of arrived, and there he was. And this guy, his name was Mohammed, and I think he was about 2 meters tall, built like a tree, as dark as night, sweating like a tank. But he was amazing. He sort of ran up to me, and he goes, Jimmy, Jimmy, Jimmy. And he said, you'll be okay. I'm going to be your guide. And I said, well, I hope so. And he said, I've got one thing to share with you. He said, we've got a 4-day drive into the desert. And I know where they are, and everything will be fine. But you know, trust me, trust me, trust me. He said, but there are a lot of guns. And I said, yeah, but, you know, I've heard about it. He said, well, it's fine, you heard. It's a ceasefire, and everybody waves these guns around. And it's just all, you know, sort of waving things around. Ignore it. When we're driving, just look upon it a bit like traffic lights. You know, and you come there and you stop, and it's sort of, you know, red, and then it goes to amber, and then you smile and make a joke, and it goes to green. So we started driving, we got into the desert, and it's hot, and it's you know, there's nothing there, and he's sitting in front, very square, and every now and again he turns around and smiles, these big white teeth. And in the first day, we hit about 13 different roadblocks, and these guys come up, and they're waving around and becoming very aggressive, and then the window goes down, and we pass a bit of money, tell a few jokes, maybe even have a cigarette, not on my behalf, on their behalf, and we sort of move on. Next day, I think about 15 traffic lights. So by now, we were getting used to these sort of stoppages on the roads. The third day, we're driving along, had a few sort of stops in the morning, and around midday, driving in the distance, there was a bit of a mirage, a little bit bigger than normal. And we were driving and we were looking, and I think there were about 20 people in this mirage. And we looked closer, and I sort of looked at Mohammed, and I said, what's that? And you could see, and this is, you know, what's extraordinary, this sort of, you're used to sort of our physicality, and his back arched. And up until now, his back had been very straight, but all of a sudden it arched, and he began to, dribbles of sweat started coming down his back and down his neck. And I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, Mohammed, we're okay. And he goes, no, this is a problem. And if you can remember, the scene began to unfold a little bit like that film with Leonardo DiCaprio, with Blood Diamond, when he sort of, I don't know if you've seen, he comes down off the bridge and those kids are waving guns around, and it's sort of anarchy. And there in front of us were about 20 children, teenagers. I have teenagers, but these ones were naked, and they were carrying Kalashnikovs, and their eyes were red. And I said, Mohammed, you know, this is just a traffic light. And he goes, no, this is not a traffic light. This is a big issue. And I said, oh, wait, don't be daft, it'll be fine. And he says, no, we're going to have to get out of the car. Now, by now, 10 of these kids were standing on the roof, banging like this and banging the guns. And the other 10 were waving their guns around in front of the window. I said, you know, I'm not going to get out of the car. And I sort of turned to Stephanie, who was with me, and she said, you know, you're insane. What are we doing here? You said we'd be safe. And I said, well, we are. We're with Mohammed. And my Muhammad sort of started turning around, and I could sort of see tears in his eyes. And I said, you can't be serious. After all these years, I can't end up in this situation. He says, get out, and get down. And and the kids were sort of breaking the windows, and I thought, oh, well, this is it. Here I am. It was last year. I'm now 50. It was then I was 14. I said, how on earth have I spent the whole of my life traveling? And surely I must have some knowledge. I must have understanding of people. I must have sort of an intuition to have not ended up in this fucking situation. And I looked at Stephanie and started to cry. And she started saying, this is it. I think it's about to finish. And I said, what do you mean? He says, they're going to kill us. And Muhammad turned around and he was sobbing. I mean, if you've got a man who's built like a tree, tears running down his eyes. I said, what on earth is going on? And just on that note, I'm going to take a pause. 2 seconds. And I'm not going to tell you the ending of the story just yet. As you can see, I didn't die. But it's extremely important why and what happened between now and the end. And I'm going to take you on a journey to explain. And then when you will understand what happened with those children, you'll understand the significance of the journey of this human connection. So this is me. A long time ago, I'm 7 years old. I grew up in Africa. My father was a geologist working for Dutch Shell. So I ran around in the bush semi-naked. At the age of 7, they sent me to an English boarding school. Bit strange, lots of priests, kids tucked around a mountain. Things happened that shouldn't have happened, but hey, it was all behind walls, and we talked about the weather and had cucumber sandwiches, so everything's okay. And I got sort of the age of, and then I got a little bit older, and they said, well, Jimmy, you're extremely stupid. You came to this school half naked from the bush, and you can't read and write. And you've got a sort of strange brain. You can only draw and sing, so you must be seriously stupid. So I arrived, I was somewhat lonely, a little bit lost, told I was stupid. And then one morning, came back from another journey. I was 16 at this stage, beginning to feel somewhat different. And I'd had cerebral malaria, so malaria of the brain. And I said to my parents, isn't it best you keep me on holiday? And they said, well, no, we don't really know how to look after you. We're going to give you back to those priests. And I said, well, trust me, they don't look after me, not in the way you think they do. And so I sort of arrived back at this boarding school, and I sort of went up to this guy, and I said, I'm feeling really ill. I'm sweating like a dog. And they said, oh, well, you just take these tablets and everything will be okay. Not knowing any different, I sort of took the wrong medicine, went to bed and woke up the next morning. And so I looked in the mirror, and I met somebody else. Here I am today, at the age of 50, and as my kids say, oh, Dad, shut up about losing your hair. Half of Amsterdam's bald these days. And I says, I know, at the age of 50, but at the age of 16, it's quite significant. First of all, you're sort of been, to all intents and purposes, abused. Then you're told you're stupid. Then you're told you're ugly, or you feel ugly. So everything that's significant as a child sort of goes on its head and becomes, we call it, pear-shaped. And I remember feeling, this isn't the way I wanted things to be. Not that you're that sort of philosophically busy when you're 16 years old, but I wasn't the happiest of bunnies. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to solve this. And I remember as a child, the way I hid from these priests mentally and emotionally was I used to read Calfieu, Tintin, and I had piles of him under my bed. And I used to go on adventures with him around the world. And I remember one morning looking in the mirror and seeing this new face, this different face, what I perceived or was told was an ugly face. Where would that have fitted into Tintin's stories, Tintin's adventures? And there was one place, that was Tibet, because that's where all the kids were bald. So when I was 17, I didn't tell anybody. I bought a one-way ticket to Beijing, and I spent 2 years living in Tibet. I dressed as a monk, and I walked by default the length of the Himalayas. Now, I didn't go because I'm an anthropologist. I didn't go because of the Dalai Lama. I didn't go because of Buddhism. I didn't really, truly know where Tibet was. I went to disappear. I went to hide, maybe, and subsequently also to try and connect, trying to find some people who thought I was okay. They said, you're all right to look the way you do. You're all right to think the way you do. You're right to act the way you do. And in those 2 years, it was magical. It was in the mid-1980s, 1986. And China was sort of, taking over Tibet, destroying 651 out of the 653 monasteries. So it was complete chaos. And I lived with these warriors, and I lived with these monks, and they hid me, and we explored, and it was extraordinary. And they gave me the most extraordinary form of a feeling of connection. I wasn't a Buddhist, I wasn't a Tibetan, I wasn't a warrior, I was nothing. But they held me, in many ways they loved me, and they empowered me. And then 2 years later, I came back with a small pile of pictures, and I had an old Russian camera. And I'd taken 4 rolls of Kodacolor Golds. Does anybody remember that? So there's 36 images, 4 rolls in 2 years. And I'd only taken pictures of the people that were nice to me, the pictures of people that had fed me, the pictures of people that had protected me. And I remember showing it to somebody, and somebody said, wow, this is quite amazing. They're not very good pictures, but these are the first pictures from Tibet in 30 years. We're going to publish them. And on the strength of that, we're going to call you a photographer. Yeah, instant profession. So I thought, well, this actually is quite good. I earn a little bit of money by disappearing. I'm going to do this again. So the next journey was I went to Afghanistan for a year, dressed up as a mujahideen, a little bit more complicated when you don't have hair, but hey, I got through that. And it evolved until what you see on the screen behind you. This was a book, the first big book I bought out about 4 years ago. Now, it was a book of, I had no idea why I was doing it. It was a book of indulgence. It was a book of passion. It was a book of wanting to share. And I went to piles of publishers. And they said, well, nobody's really interested in tribes anymore. It's the past, and they're all a bit sort of, yeah, but and it's not really real. And then I met one, he was actually very nice, and he said, well, we're going to print 2, one for your mother and one for your grandmother. Just to respect for all the effort and the work you put in. This was 4 years ago. I either have 250,000 mothers and grandmothers, or something strange happened. The book began to sell. And it began to sell, and the images started to go viral online, and a whole discussion began to ensue. Here they are, these sort of iconic, extraordinarily beautiful tribes and cultures from around the world. And the discussion was quite interesting. First of all, it's complimentary, nice pictures. And then people started saying, well, who are these people? And I said, well, they're my friends. They're people I meet. They're people I love. They're people I see. They're people I want to show. And then the conversation got a bit further. I think the book was published in about 7,000 magazines, many more thousands of blogs. And it started to get into this whole idea of what are they? Well, they're just people. Well, what kind of people are they? Well, they're sort of tribal people. Well, then they're not actually real. And I said, well, what do you mean? These people have disappeared. This is a fantasy. This is art. This is an illusion. You put them there. And I said, well, no, they're all there. They all look like this. And they said, well, they can't look like this. They're too beautiful. Also, they do look like this. Well, they can't be like this. And then there was a massive online discussion by Survival International, which is a very important organization, started to accuse me, Jimmy's wrong-headed obsession with vanishing indigenous cultures. Now, this is the discussion I want to have with you today, but I need somebody's help. So I'm going to borrow you. Do you mind coming standing on the stage for a minute? Okay. You're going to be my chief today, okay? And this is a little bit of theater, so if I can stand you here. Yeah. First of all, I've got to explain how I communicate. And the best way I describe it is I'm essentially Mr. Bean. Everybody's seen Mr. Bean. Wherever you are in the world, you see him on a screen. He never talks, he never says anything, but you completely understand what he's doing. So when I arrive at these people, the most important part is to give them the feeling of authority. I'm not bigger, I'm not better, I'm not stronger, I'm not wiser. I'm also not richer, and I'll get to that in a minute. All I am is absolutely fascinated by who you are. I'm in awe of who you are. And when you arrive here in Papua New Guinea, to all intents and purposes, they're still cannibals. You arrive and you put yourself down and you sort of give yourself, you give yourself like a dog. You put yourself at their feet. And for the first few days, even hours, they intimidate me, they kick me, they shout at me. And they try to make me terrified, and I am terrified. Here they don't have guns, but they've got spears and knives. I'm sort of absolutely terrified. And you have to show that. You have to show your sincere vulnerability. And then slowly they sort of go away because the game is won. There's no power anymore. Nobody's going to they can sort of beat the hell out of me. And people begin to disappear until you remain behind. And we start sort of making eye contact, and you're sort of a little bit more curious. And I start slowly coming up to you and touching you and looking at you, and then eventually I go, oh, wow, you're amazing. You're strong like this. Stay there, stay there, stay there. So you stay there, and I sort of run back, and in my bag here, I've got this very old, I use most of the time this old technical plate film camera. Does that mean sheet film, analog? I'll explain that in a while as well. It's very difficult, it's very slow, it's very cumbersome. It really helps you to become Mr. Bean because everything goes wrong half the time. And you're sort of hanging there falling off waterfalls or mountains and ditches. And you get into this whole sort of eccentric, very autistic process of looking and sheeting, lining up, and the whole time running backwards and forwards and obsessively looking at the light or the structure and beginning to worship. And it gets quite special, and you're sort of running around, and slowly you begin to sort of you see that you're being adored. And then I run back and I get back to the camera, and the camera's almost ready, and I think, oh, I need more light. I need more light to make it beautiful. And we're in the middle of the jungle as it is here, so I've got to run back to the village and get those people who wanted to kill me a few minutes. Stay there. So you sort of run back into the village, and you get a few other people who come with you onto the stage. I think, thank you very much. Quick. Don't worry, you don't have to do anything. It's not very complicated. It's only photography. And you're running, so well, I need an assistant. So you go and stand over there. I need a new glass of water. Can you hold that? Yeah, and get don't press any buttons. Can you get me a glass of water? I need somebody else who needs to come up here. Quick. Okay, and then the whole idea is you've got to stand up straight the way I lined you. Okay, the lights. It's all about the lights. You see, come with me. You see the sun up there? Okay, you see the sun up there? I'm going to give you a reflector. I'm going to bounce the light on him like that. Yeah, okay? Stay there, concentrate. You're my assistant. You've got to come back down here. Sorry, I brought you up. Put you back down. Whoops, okay. Down here. Whoops, okay. I need another reflector there. You see there, bang. See the shadows on his face there? You've got to concentrate, okay? And then I need you, and you need to get down here low. Sit. And I need you to line up the shadow under his chin, down like that. And in the meantime, you have about 30 members of the village all running around holding reflectors. And I run back to my camera. It's half an hour later. Here's my assistant with some water with a glass I'm not going to break this time. Okay, you ready? And I look down at the camera. He's looking up into that. Break. Stay there. And then this is half an hour later, and you get back and you realize the sun has moved. Oh, shit. The sun has moved. Concentrate. It's about the sun. And, you're not going to be stupid, like this. And you stand up. So this goes on for hours until you get back down behind your camera. You get back down. Everybody's ready. Concentrate. Okay, look. Just up. Be strong. That's it. Shh. Ready. You put the one sheet in. Is the microphone okay? You put the one sheet in, and bang, it goes. And it takes about 3 seconds, a very long exposure. And then if it gets right and you don't move, yeah, I got the picture. Oh, thank you. It's amazing. Thank you. And you sort of dance around a bit. And then there's this sort of moment of ecstasy. And then you come and you say, well, actual fact, I'm much more important than he is. It's my turn. You go and hold the reflector. You go and sit down there. You come and stand here. And then the whole village comes and stands up to have their picture taken. So this is great. So you take the whole village and you've made contact, and then everybody goes back to bed, and off you go back to bed. Come, you can go.
Is it better for you? Yeah, it's yours, yeah.
Do you want me to take this one off?
Yeah, it's fine. Leave it on.
Yeah? Is that better?
Yeah.
Although I need my hand, so you may get a microphone on your head in a minute, but we'll see how that goes. And then everybody's had their picture made, and you're exhausted. And then the beautiful thing of having a name like Jimmy is the next morning you're in bed, and then the chief comes, and he goes, oh, Jimmy. And you're going, what, I take everybody's picture yesterday. He goes, Jimmy. And a whole new village has come from another valley because they heard this sort of Mr. Bean character. He goes, oh, you're amazing, you're strong, you're incredible. And they'll come all dressed up. So you can go, thank you very much. And then, so that's sort of in a basic way how you start to communicate. And it's all about sort of hero worship and adoration and this feeling of pride. And then it gets exciting. You think, wow, wouldn't it be amazing? I've met all these people. And it took me 3 days to walk up to this village. And I saw this beautiful waterfall on the way. Oh, I'd love to photograph the Huli wig men in front of the waterfall. So you sort of run back into the village. I'm going to leave you sitting now, but I'm just coming down for the sake of argument. So you've got to come with this waterfall. It'd be amazing. Now if I get 6 of you standing in front of the waterfall, and the water, oh, it's going to be beautiful. Please come. So they follow me. And it goes on sometimes for 3 days. And you sort of disappear off into the jungle. And you eventually sort of get to this magnificent sort of natural setting, this sort of waterfall cascading down out of the jungle. And if you get it right and they understand you and they believe you and they feel the power and they feel the pride and they feel the honor, they end up standing there, and this is what happens. And it's a picture. It's only a picture. We all make pictures. The whole world makes pictures. I think at the moment, is it 3 billion pictures are being uploaded online every day at the moment. So being a photographer is not relevant. I think it's all about the process, the energy, the effort. There's a small anecdote. Some kids the other day said, well, Jimmy, why do you use that old camera? Is it because you're old as well? And I said, oh, yeah, perhaps. But there's actually another reason. There were 16 kids. And I said, well, look, if you've got tomorrow morning, you've all got cameras. Yeah, we're all photographers. I said, well, you've got 2 choices. You can run onto the school square and kiss every girl you see. It's a bit of I'm going off at a tangent now, but bear with me. Or the other option is you can choose one girl to kiss for 1 second at the last minute of the last hour of the last day of the week. Which would you choose? I go for option 1. Okay. I go halfway through my story. Okay. So go for option one. Yeah? I go for option one. Okay, well, I'm going to go for option two. Well, why do you go for option two? Well, it has nothing to do with the kiss. It's about the process. It's about the hunt, the search, the seduction, the focus. When you go and you kiss everybody straight away, the kiss is irrelevant. It's about the power of the emotion. So the same idea with this very old camera. It's not about the quantity of the pictures. It's about the time and the effort and the focus and the indulgence you put into making that one picture. The picture comes on the screen behind you. And is that working now? Is that working? Can you hear me? It'll work in a second. It's not about the picture, but the effort you put into making this picture, walking days, weeks into the jungle, is extraordinary. And if you really feel it and exude it, you communicate that with the people, and they end up standing there proud. They end up standing there strong. And then this is what the discussion is about the pictures. These pictures can't be true. And then these kids said, yeah, but you know what this picture looks like? It looks like Avatar. I said, well, it is Avatar, but it's also real. They're yellow as opposed to blue, but these people are extraordinary. These people are rich. They have a knowledge. They have an understanding. They have a power. They have a strength. They have a connection of how it really is to be a human, how it really is to be connected with one another, with one's traditions, with one's culture, with one's environment. Now, I'm not saying we all have to tomorrow run off into the jungle and dress ourselves in sort of skins and sort of yellow faces. But it's more, look at these people, admire them, understand them, look at what wealth is in a different way. It's not necessarily what's in our pocket. It's in what we feel, and what we know, and what we are, and what we understand. And I was taught this lesson even more profoundly a few months later on this journey here. This was to Chukotka, again, another really weird place. Siberia. You've got Moscow, and then 13 hours, would you believe it, still in Russia, 13 hours east of Moscow, you get to Chukotka. And in Chukotka live the Chukchi. Now, the Chukchi are a group of they're called brigades. There's about 60 of them, 20 in each brigade, of the Eskimos still living in the tundra, 1,500 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle. And they're, to all intents and purposes, one of the last true living groups of Eskimos. And again, much the same as the saw in Sudan, I've been online, met somebody, they said, you got to come to Chukchi and meet the Chukchis. And I said, yeah, but it's cold, it's isolated. He said, it's all right, I'll look after you. So here I landed. This was after about 2 years organization. Here I'm at the airport. Yeah. And no, I'm not joking, this was the airport here. And there's one flight every 3 weeks. When you arrive there, it's about minus 40 degrees, but it was exciting. It's an adventure, and again, you sort of and there he is, and he's at the airport, and great, where are they? And he says, yeah, they're there, they're in the tundra. And I said, oh, yeah, 2 years of this has been building up for this journey. He says, I've got 3 weeks. This is going to be a long trip. 3 weeks? You're going to need more than 3 weeks. I said, well, why? And he said, well, this is a big place, Chukotka. And I said, well, how big is it? And he said, well, it's about the size of France. Okay. So in the size of France, an area that doesn't look much more like this, just sort of white tundra, there are 3 groups of 20 people, and they're nomads. Interesting. Okay, this is going to be a little bit more challenging than most of the journeys that I go on. But we've spent 2 years communicating with each other. You knew I was coming. You've told them I'm coming. So, well, I know they're there. I knew you were coming. And what I've done in preparation for you coming, I've organized my brother's tundra tank. That's here. And I'm very proud, he said, I've installed a 2-month diesel container on the roof. 2 months? Yeah, well, it may take 2 months to get there. And I said, I can't come with you for fucking 2 months disappearing across. I've got an agenda and a time. And he said, but I don't know where they are. So you can't be serious. Oh, no. He said, well, you don't have to come. You can spend 3 weeks here waiting at the airport. It's not much duty-free till the next flight, which goes back in 3 weeks. And then I said, well, okay, hypothetically, if I come with you, how are we going to find them? He says, oh, that's easy. I'm going to sit on the roof, and I'm going to follow the reindeer shit. And and this is when it gets really complicated. I said, the reindeer shit, how does that work? He says, well, they're reindeer herders. They have each brigade has about 4,000 reindeer, and I can follow the shit and the age and find them in this area the size of France. May take a few weeks, but it will be special. So as you can see, by default, I got into this tank. Now, this journey was bizarre. This is every morning. The outside came in. This was in February, so it's minus 30 inside, minus 50 outside. I sat on the way there with Bram, the cameraman who came with me, for 28 days. 28 days of going 15 kilometers an hour, bumbling along across the ice, wondering, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I going on this journey? And 28 days later, blizzards, storms, whiteouts, lots of sort of philosophical disorientation. Here's the tank. We sort of came over this mountain range, and the Chukchi guy's sitting on the roof, and he started yelling and screaming, and I thought, oh, what's happening now? And in the distance, we saw this sort of tent. And I tell you, if you spent 28 days in a tank, this feels like you've arrived on Staten Island in New York. It's the center of the universe. So I'm sort of excited, and you sort of get sort of an idea of who I am for the few minutes I've been standing on this stage, and sort of bounce around a bit. Oh my God, a tent! They're there. So we sort of drove down off the mountain to the tent, and they were having a picnic in minus fucking 40 degrees centigrade. And I sort of ran up to them. And I said, oh, I'm Jimmy. I'm doing this amazing project, these pictures and everything. No time for compliments. Just sit still. I've got to make a picture and get home. And they sort of looked at me through the mist and the cold, sort of hacking away at their reindeer. And they sort of looked at me, and they looked at the translator, who was really good, unusual for these journeys. And he raised his finger. And this man here, he was an amazing guy. He raised his finger, and he goes, "Niet," like this. And I don't speak Russian, but I kind of got the idea as well. What? And I looked at the... He's saying no, and he's saying no. Saying no to what? He's saying no to pictures. No pictures? I spent 2 years in this tank. I haven't come all this way not to make any pictures, And then the whole of the picnic started going, niet, 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 niet. And they got out a bit of vodka and offered me a bit of vodka. I said, I don't want to drink, I want to take your picture. And then I said, well, I'll be quick. And they said, well, it's not about being quick. And then I got out some money, and I said, I'll pay you. And they said, well, we don't use money here. We don't, no use for that. So it's your soul. And they said, well, we don't believe in anything either. We believe in the nature. It has nothing to do with anything in the sky. And they also said, but we know what cameras are. And we know what film is. And we used to watch TV. And some of us have even been on TV. And I was sort of losing it a bit. So going, well, how can you know anything about this, but you're living here in the middle of nowhere? And they said, well, in the meantime, we don't want you to take our picture. It's not that you can't. It's too cold. On average, the daily temperatures are minus 50 degrees centigrade. I just came back a few weeks ago, again from another part of Siberia, which I'll talk about in a minute. It is too cold. You cannot sit still. Every second of the day is based on surviving. And they said, but we would love you to stay. And I said, well, this is 4 years. I said, but what am I going to do if I can't take pictures? And this is sad, if you've been doing what I've been doing till the age of 46. And then they challenged me, and they said, is that the only reason you came? To make pictures? Didn't you come to meet us? Didn't you come to talk to us? Didn't you come to understand us? Didn't you come to live with us? Didn't you come to experience our life? Didn't you come to ask why we're here? We've chosen to be here. We don't have to be here. We don't have to be here. Aren't you curious about this? Is it just about the pictures you make? And this is a very confronting moment. It was very intimidating, very humbling, and I thought also a bit pathetic. Oh my goodness me, it's just about these pictures. I stayed. And for 2 weeks, I wasn't allowed, in a respectful way, to make any pictures. For 2 weeks, I felt like sort of creative SM, my hands handcuffed behind my backs. But for the very first time in my life, I observed. I'm often accused by this in the relationships I'm as well. Please, sweetie, watch and observe. And I observed, and I began to live, and I began to sort of understand, and I began to really see who these people were. They're amazing people. If this environment is harsh, it's wild, it's brutal, and they choose to be here. And this sort of, after 2 weeks of conversation, and at night, it's so cold, you crawl into these yurangas, and there's 20 of you in these yurangas, men, women, children, reindeer, dogs, and the only way to stay warm is you become one. You become human sardines. You don't know them, but they put their hands in your groins and your armpits, and you squeeze each other. You squeeze each other, the life into each other to keep each other warm. And you get to know each other in the most extraordinary way as other human beings. And again, you're not communicating at them with words, but you're communicating at them in a way that you've forgotten how to communicate with people. They keep you alive. The journey I came back on a few weeks ago, I was very ill on the second day. I got food poisoning. And in the middle of the night, I was vomiting in this tent. It was, again, brutal temperatures. And there are 8 adults, 6 kids, 3 dogs, and 2 reindeer. And I'm in the tent, sort of retching all night. I woke up in the next morning. If any of you have been sick, you just want to be left alone in the morning to feel better. And you're in this very, very, very tight environment. And how these people began to look after me, how these people began to, it's mind-blowing. And by going so far, by becoming so vulnerable, in this case, as a few weeks ago, so ill, They protected me and actually perhaps held me in a way that I've spent the whole of my life trying to achieve, which wasn't given to me by my parents, wasn't given to me by my friends, wasn't given to me by the environment that I grew up in, but is given to me by an Eskimo who wants nothing from me other than human respect. Anyway, towards the end, the last night they said you can make a few pictures, and the pictures you see were made in only 2 hours. So that's 2 years research, a month in a tank going there, 2 weeks there, 2 weeks going back for just one afternoon of pictures. So they're kind of valuable. And they said, but why are you here? What are you doing here? And they said, well, this is where we used to live. We used to live in this block of flats. I said, what were you doing there? I said, well, a long story, but I'll try and shorten it down for you. We lived here 6 years ago. Well, we lived on the ice, and the authorities came to us and said, oh, it's the year 2000, tribes, primitive, you're a waste of time. But we're proud of you, the Chukchi. We're going to move you to the city. Don't need you in the reindeer anymore. We're going to put all your fur in a museum. And we're going to give you some flats. And every now and again, you come to the museum and do a bit of a dance and something traditional. And we'll go, oh, amazing, amazing, amazing. And that's it. You're subsidized. You're a sort of subsidized tribe. You don't really have to do anything for it. And they didn't have any objectivity. So they moved to the city. And they had a block of flats, skidoos, alcohol. Kids disappeared to school. Old people were sort of put away somewhere. And 6 months later, this bureaucrat came up to them. They were sort of watching TV one night, drunk out of their skulls. And he came up and said, how are you doing? And he looked at him and said, oh, you don't look very happy. And the Chukchi sort of looked up at this bureaucrat and said, well, what's happy? He said, well, happy. You look as like you've lost something. You look like your joie de vivre, your zest for life is gone. And they all looked at one and said, yeah, well, if that's a word we don't have in our language, we don't feel happy. And he said, why? And he said, well, we don't do fucking anything any day. We just sit on our asses. The next morning, the chief you saw gathered all 60 of them together, plus other people, and he said, we're going back. 6 years later, I found them in the tents. He said, here at the end of the world, in this isolation, in this remote existence, we have purpose. We have pride. We have connection. We feel strong. We feel alive. We may not be alive tomorrow because of the conditions, but every day we live is rich. It's empowering. We see the light. We feel the nature. We feel one another. We have purpose, and we understand for our intents and purposes why we're here. We're reindeer herders. We live off these animals. These animals are our soul and our identity, and this is where we choose to live. And I found that magnificent, that here I am today. I live up in Amsterdam, and I sort of wear my clothes and my shirts. And I'm not telling you to run across the ice or run off into Papua New Guinea, but I am saying, and I'm not encouraging you, because most of you don't have time or as stupidly eccentric or autistic as I am to want to go to these places. But when you are connected with who you are, with how you live, with why you live, with the people you love, the environment that you live in, you can make some of the most fantastic decisions. These Chukchi, they chose to live in this environment. They chose to live here. I'm making another book, and which is going to come out in September, and this is a sneak preview of the cover page. And it's going to be exciting, because the first book was this sort of indulgence. Look at these people. Aren't they beautiful? Aren't they rich? 4 years of people poking me and saying, yeah, but what, but why, but who, but where, what, when, and what do you mean rich? This is the next book. But the beauty of the next book is that every single picture I've made, I went back to some of the tribes from the first journey. I took the pictures back. I discussed it with them. I wanted to interview them. I wanted to ask them, what do you want, like the Chukchi? Do you want to stay here? Do you want a telephone? Do you want to develop, or do you want to hold on to some of your culture? And we filmed everything at the same time with virtual reality cameras. So with the new book, we've developed an app. Every single picture in the book will come alive with an app with your smartphone. Within the book, we're having a pair of glasses built in, virtual reality glasses. So you can come with me. I still don't have the definitive answer of these places and the people and their value, but I'm desperate to share with you what I see and why I see it. So much so I went back to Siberia a few weeks ago. Here I am. And I was introduced to these people. These people are called the Dolgon, and they're coming in part of the second book. And again, this is really only a few weeks ago. And they live in these little houses on skis. And they live here all year in the tundra. This is 2,000 kilometers. They're the furthest northern living people on the planet above the Arctic Circle. They have, again, 4,000 or 5,000 reindeer. You can see them here on the right. And they travel around the ice with these houses, herding them, groups of 20. And again, some of the proudest, strongest, it becomes addictive when you go to these places. And I got there a little bit quicker this time because the Russian government said, we quite like your project. It's quite positive. We're going to enable you to get to this place so you don't have to spend 2 months living in a tank. When you get there, it becomes an extraordinary feeling to see these places, to feel these people, to experience it. And that's why I'm making this new book. That's why I talk with you here today, to look at one another, whether you're looking at them or looking at one another or looking at this boy in Chad or looking at the huli here in Papua New Guinea or going here. I mean, this is an amazing place here. This is in the Tufi Islands of Papua New Guinea. And they live on these boats under these waterfalls. It is Avatar-esque. It's out of this world. Part of the second book is we're making a film, and again, it's about giving the books back, discussing with these people, and trying to have the conversation that I'm having with you here today. What was the catalyst of the pictures? And we went back to the Himba in northern Namibia. Now, the Himba are quite accessible. They're beautiful people, and the environment that they live in is very remote. It's right on the border of Angola. It takes about a 4-hour flight from Windhoek, the main airport. I think 98% of the Himbas have moved to the cities. About 2 to 3% are still left in the desert. And I went back and I took the book, and there was a lot of screaming and yelling the first few days. And I said, I was a bit upset, maybe I'd done something wrong. And they said, no, as you said, many people have been to us before. You are not the first person. I think 100 years ago, somebody started photographing the Himbas. But in all that time, nobody ever came back and gave us the pictures they took. So we've seen, ever since we can remember, our grandparents and our great-grandparents, these strange white people invariably coming with machines and sticking them, but we've never seen it in all those years. You're the very first person to bother, not that minor, more significant pictures, not to show us the pictures. And they said, thank you. It's not for the picture or the quality of the picture, but we don't want the books, but that you gave us the dignity to show us what you took of us. Now you've done that, we're going to tell you what you did wrong. So that was another discussion. But then you get into this, and now you're going to have to do it again. So that's also part of the second book. And then this discussion about what are you trying to show? Because this is what we have to say. This is what we see. This is what we want. This is who we want to be. Please help us. And it's very, very special experience. And then another journey was back to Vanuatu. If any of you love traveling, you have to go here. There are 83 islands in the Pacific, very, very remote. And on the southernmost island is the island of Tanna. And here you have the Yakale, and they live in these magnificent sort of tree houses and these banyan trees underneath a live volcano because the ground is very rich. And I went back and I was very proud because it's a long way, and with all my gear and some books, and presented it to the chief, and the chief said, he actually spoke quite good English because he'd visited Australia. He said, come and sit down with me and let's have a selfie in the tree. So I remember sort of sitting with him here under the tree, and this is a very special moment for me because I thought, it's a nice completion of a circle. Here I am trying to do some good. I'm not just taking, I'm giving back, and set up for the tree, and we check the light. I'm sitting next to the chief, and he looks over and he goes, yeah, but there's a big problem. I go, but what's the problem? He says, yeah. You've made me happy, but you've made many other people very unhappy. And I thought, oh, Jesus, here goes, What have I done wrong? And he said, I bought you the book back. I promised you I'd bring it back, and I'm going to bring it to everybody. He says, yeah, you bought it back to me, but what about the other 80 people in the tree? They want a book as well. So if anybody want to come on a sabbatical and we can employ a banana boat, please, we need to go back to this tree and many other trees like it to bring the books back to them. This is a bit of a sort of side. People offer, how do you balance this odd life? And this is my family. Well, it was a while ago, quite a long time ago, when my kids were small. And when my kids were small, I was allowed to bleed. The chief and my wife was saying, it's okay, pretend they're going to listen to you. And I ran around making all these pictures of them, and they invariably did listen. And sort of time moved on, and they became teenagers. And this is my son. And then last year, something very interesting happened. He decided to start calling me an arsehole. Excuse me for being blunt. And I said, well, why? He said, well, you're not here anymore. You've left me. You've abandoned me. I said, yeah, but I haven't abandoned you. I love you, but I live in a strange profession. I'm trying to make a living to pay the gas and licht. And it's exciting. People want to hear what I have to say and see the pictures that I make. He says, but I don't give a shit. You're my dad, and you're not here. Now you've connected with all these, why do you like black kids more than you like me? Explain it to me. And he was 17. And I have a daughter and a son, 2 daughters older and younger than him, and they're not as direct as him, but he said, you really have, I don't want you anymore as a father. And I thought, oh my God, I've spent the whole of my life on this journey of connection, standing here talking to you today about human beings and seeing and understanding one another. And the one man, I've got 2 daughters, but the one man, that's my predecessor, my son, I've lost connection when he's calling me an arsehole, and I've tried so hard to impress him. And I was very upset, and I thought, if ever you lose the balance of human connection, this is it. And my youngest daughter came up, and she's very smart, and she said, you've got problems. And I said, I know, which one? And she said, well, let's talk about the one with your son. Oh, okay. She says, he really doesn't like you. I said, I know, I wish he was proud of him. She said, no, he just thinks you're just not there. She said, well, Mum's away next week. I've got an idea. Why don't we take him out shopping? I said, well, what good is that? He said, well, he's changed. You haven't seen his changes. He's become very much more gothic. He wants to change his bedroom, get rid of the color and make it more black. And I've got an idea. She said, why don't we take him to IKEA? And I said, what are we going to do in IKEA? And she said, well, just take him there and we'll see what happens. So, but where is he? He's not in, I'll make sure he's in the car tonight. So that night he sort of turned up with his hat on and his headphones and 3 different sort of digital apparatus around and playing games and grunted at me, arsehole. And we sort of drove off to IKEA, and I was sort of very sheepishly sitting in the front of the car, much the same as I was in Sudan, I think. And we came in, and half an hour through IKEA, he came up to me and said, you really think you can buy me off by taking me shopping for something? I went, one evening shopping in IKEA is not going to solve anything the way you abandon me. So I sat down, and I had this almost sort of breakdown. It was Thursday evening. I think I did know a few people in IKEA that night, so I didn't cry, but I felt like crying. And I thought, how am I going to solve this? My youngest daughter came up and she said, Dad, you know what your biggest problem is? And I said, well, other than Narush, she says, you've lost all your sense of humor. You take yourself so seriously. And I go, well, what do you mean? She said, well, when we were kids, we used to play with you a lot. You had much more time for us. And one of the things we loved was your bald head. I said, well, how's that? And I said, well, we always had these toys, and we used to stick them on your head and hit them from side to side. And you used to walk around town and put on all those wigs, and it was great, because you didn't care. Now you're this, you've got to give talks and take pictures and make books, and you're not there. Why don't we just have a laugh? She said, look what I've found. So she said, I've found these brushes. Can I stick one back on your head? And I said, well, go ahead. I've got nothing to lose anymore. Within 2 or 3 minutes, a whole load of other kids had come up with a bunch of brushes and stuck them on my head. And I wasn't thinking anything other than I'm looking completely stupid. But then out of the shadows, my son came. And he walked past me and he goes, wow, cool. Took a picture on his iPhone and walked away. 2 days later, still no contact with him. I'm sitting in my study. And then bang, the door goes. And he comes running upstairs. And says, Dad, something amazing has happened. Something amazing's happened. I go, what's happened? He said, look at my phone. Sort of shoved it in my eyes. And I'm starting to wear glasses. I can't focus. What is it? He goes, look, what's happened to me? And I sort of pulled it away and said, what's happened to you? He said, that picture I took in IKEA. I wrote underneath the perks of being bald and bored in IKEA. And I put it on 9gag, that sort of worldwide humor site. I got 1.5 million likes. It's insane. He said, I'm so popular. And I said, well, what do you mean? My whole school, I'm famous. People are queuing up to get my advice. He says, I've got a favor to ask you now. He got onto his knees. It's the first time he's spoken to me in months. He says, Dad, can you help me? And I'm going, of course I can help you. He said, can you help me with social media? I said, I don't know anything about it. Somebody else does that for me. He says, it's not about that. I'm going to invite my whole class tomorrow. You just have to impress them. I've told you you're this photographer, and you just sit next to me. I'm going to put and every now and again when I tell you to put that brush on your head, just put it on and nod your head from side to side, and everything will be fine. So the next night we had a table full of teenagers, and I'm sitting at the head with brushes going, saying nothing, and my son's explaining social media and how he got liked 1.5 million times. I thought it was a very beautiful irony. The one person, or one of the people I lost that balance of human contact with, I refound that contact by vulnerability, by empathy, by stupidity, and by truly wanting to get back in touch with them, by truly giving in and finding a way, in a way that went far beyond anything that I understood, by letting go. And I thought the irony is here I am sort of looking like some contemporary IKEAN leader with this sort of headdress going on. But in the meantime, what's exciting is once you start wearing brushes on your head, you get carried away. I haven't got any down here, but I start to wear them a lot. And I've got many other things I've started to stick up, but I warn you, any of you who don't have hair, sticking things on your head leaves a bruise mark. So you end up looking like you have some kind of disease, so be careful, okay? Unless you have to carry bags of makeup around with it to cover it all up. But I'm wearing these brushes, and not only am I wearing them, I'm putting them on other people's heads as well, which I quite enjoy. And it actually brought me even closer to why I do what I do. I'm desperate for this idea of giving back. It's not just me making my pictures. I'm sort of beginning to come up with a few answers. The journey is unending, and as you've heard a million times, it's not the destination, it's the process. But I'm beginning to feel I want to share what I do with others. So I've set up a foundation. And the foundation is to enable other like-minded people, young, old, black, white, male or female, who have this urge to go off into the world to see these indigenous cultures, to put them on a pedestal, to make them beautiful, to make them proud. And we're now being sponsored. Every year we're going to try and organize between 4 and 8 journeys to tribal festivals. And we want to sort of collate and gather all these traditions, these faces, these costumes, these languages, and these songs for this sort of global digital fireplace. And this is the foundation. Here's a small film. We're all people. We're all essentially the same, and whether we're black or white, we've got long hair or no hair, we wear a turban on our head, or we dance backwards around a fire. We're all the same people. We all must feel the same. We have the same emotions. We love, we laugh, we cry, we hug, we're desperate, we celebrate. The Jimmy Nelson Foundation it's a kaleidoscope. It's a celebration. It's a rainbow of individuality. It's a rainbow of expression. It's a rainbow of people. It's a rainbow of individuals who feel something. And through that feeling, in this case of their culture, they want to show and share. So I really hope the Jimmy Nelson Foundation is very simply a catalyst of creative people being sent off into the world to see, to share, to feel, and to bring back a sort of a creative expression of what's still out there. I want to go off into the world and say, look, do what I do, feel what I feel. It's out of this world. It has to be a catalyst for the indigenous cultures themselves to realize how precious they are, how extraordinary they are, how beautiful they are, and how little of it is still left and how valuable it is to us today. I want to show the world that through this communication, through this extraordinary heritage that we still have, perhaps we can sort of readdress of how we actually look at each other and sort of readdress that pride. Sudan. Okay, I'm on my knees, remember? It's hot, it's 12 o'clock, the sun is high, it's excruciatingly, the kids are screaming, their eyes are all red, I've got a crying driver, a crying partner next to me, everything's gone apeshit, and I'm looking up and I'm thinking, what brought it all down to this moment? And I looked up at one of the kids who was shouting, and he had these extraordinary scars on his forehead, these deep, deep V's. And I looked up and I thought, either I'm seeing something or I recognize them. It's this tribal scar of a group I photographed in Ethiopia a few years ago called the Mursi. And I said, that can't be true. It's a very, very significant human signature. So very quickly and discreetly, I managed to pull out the one copy of the book I had with me, and I opened it and I started banging on the page. And I looked up and started banging on his forehead. And this kid looked down, and you will not believe it. He looked down. He put his gun down and he got on his knees, and within 10 minutes, every one of the kids had put their guns down, and there I was showing them the book. I started to tell stories. They didn't understand it. I didn't speak their language, but I started to point at their bodies. I started to point at their foreheads. I started to point at my forehead, started to look at the cameras. And by using hands and feet and passion and fear, everybody was still crying and the boys were still shaking. They were afraid. We began to sort of connect in a different way. And the boys started to bang their chests, and the boys started to say, and one of them recognized one of his relations, an uncle, in one of the pictures. And then an hour later, Muhammad, his tears were gone, and he was going, I believe in Jesus. I have nothing to do with Jesus, mate. We will be okay. And I said, well, you said we would when we met you in the airport the other, but thanks to me coming with my book, it didn't solve anything. He said, but now I will look after you. I said, oh, get a life. And he said, but what can I do? And he said, speak. And the boys through him started translating. He said, where are you going? And I said, well, we're going to the Mundari. And the boys thought it was very funny. They all said, don't go there, it's very dangerous. People with guns. I thought, I beg your pardon. Okay, it's very dangerous, people with guns, but yeah, we will come and protect you. So for the next 2 weeks, these kids traveled with us. We've made a film of it. Around to the Mundari, they stood around the village waving these guns around and drove us back to the airport. I don't advise you to go to such an extreme, and in this case, it was a little bit stupid. But how beautiful is an experience like that? How beautiful is an experience of desperately wanting to see, to connect by putting yourself in an excruciatingly, to be honest, stupidly vulnerable situation. But how magnificent was that eventual connection? And the pictures, and again, they're only pictures, but the foreplay that went into making those pictures blew my mind. I'm going to leave you with one picture. This is a picture of Yuri, and he lives in the Yamal, and this is an old picture of 4 years ago. I actually went to see him again a few weeks ago. And it's just more of a sort of symbolic metaphor. Look in his eyes. Strangely, there's a picture of me. Somebody said the other day, in a world of selfies, perhaps this is your selfie, Jimmy. And I said, well, he doesn't look like me. He said, no, but look in his eyes. There you are, standing behind a tripod, yelling and screaming. Perhaps that's what it is. You've etched yourself on these people's soul, on this story. And these are the pictures and the stories that you're trying to share. So I leave this picture with you. I don't have any answers. Technologically, I have no idea whatsoever. But I do know these places and these people are magnificent. I do know they have a wealth and a richness. I do know it's very, very, very important for humankind. How and what and where and when, I don't know. But this picture is a catalyst of thought, of ideas, to please look beyond one another and look beyond other people in the world and realize how excruciatingly valuable we are. It's not the size of the car that we have, it's what we know and how we feel as human beings. Thank you very much.